Hi everyone, happy Friday. Today we're going to continue with Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. So yesterday, a lot of things happening. We noticed that people are still getting petrified all over the place. People still think that Harry might be the heir to Slytherin, but the Polyjuice Potion is ready. So the Polyjuice Potion is going to allow you to transform into someone else. So Ron and Harry are going to transform into Crabbe and Goyle to figure out if it really is Malfoy, the heir of Slytherin. That is where we're going to pick up today. As the last term ended and a silence deep in the castle, in the snow on the grounds descended on the castle, Harry found it peaceful rather than gloomy. He enjoyed the fact that he, Hermione, and the Weasleys had the run of Gryffindor Tower, which meant they could play Exploding Snap as loudly without bothering anyone, and practice dueling in private. Fred, George, and Ginny had chosen to stay at school rather than visit Bill in Egypt with Mr. and Mrs. Weasley. Percy, who disapproved of what he termed their childish behavior, didn't spend much time in the Gryffindor common room. He had already told them pompously that he was only staying over Christmas because it was his duty as a prefect to support the teachers during this troubled time. Christmas morning dawned, cold and white. Harry and Ron, the only ones left in their dormitory, were woken up very early by Hermione, who burst in fully dressed, carrying presents for both of them. "Wake up," she said loudly, pulling back the curtains of the window. "Hermione, you're not supposed to be in here," said Ron, shielding his eyes against the light. "Merry Christmas to you too," said Hermione, throwing him a present. "I've been up for nearly an hour, adding more lace wings to the potion. It's ready." Harry sat up, wide awake. "Are you sure?" "Positive," said Hermione, shifting Scabbers the rat so she could sit down at the end of the four-poster. "If we're going to do it, I say it should be tonight." At that moment, Hedwig swooped in from the room carrying a very small package in her beak. "Hello," said Harry happily as she landed on his bed. "Are you speaking to me again?" She nibbled in his ear in an affectionate sort of way, which was a far better present than the one she had brought him, which turned out to be from the Dursleys. They sent Harry a toothpick and a note telling him asking him to find out whether he'd be able to stay at Hogwarts for the summer holidays too. The rest of Harry's Christmas presents were far more satisfactory. Hagrid had sent him a tin of treacle fudge, which Harry decided to soften by the fire before eating. Ron had given him a book called Flying with Cannons, a book of interesting facts about his favorite Quidditch team, and Hermione had brought him a luxury eagle feather quill. Harry opened the last present and to find a new hand-knitted jumper from Mrs. Weasley and a large plum cake. He put her card with a fresh surge of guilt, thinking about Mr. Weasley's car, which hadn't been seen since its crash with the Whomping Willow. The bot of rule breaking he and Ron were planning next. No one, even someone dreading taking Polyjuice Potion later, could fail to enjoy Christmas dinner at Hogwarts. The Great Hall looked magnificent. Not only were there a dozen frost-covered Christmas trees and thick streamers of holly and mistletoe crossing the ceiling, but enchanted snow was falling. Warm and dry from the ceiling, Dumbledore led them into his favorite carols, Hagrid booming more loudly with each goblet of eggnog he consumed. Percy noticed that Fred had bewitched his prefect badge so that it now read Pinhead, and kept asking him what all the sniggering was at. Harry didn't even care that Draco Malfoy was making loud, snide remarks about his new jumper from the Slytherin table. With a bit of luck, Malfoy would be getting his comeuppance in a few hours' time. Harry and Ron had barely finished their third helping of Christmas pudding when Hermione ushered them into the hall to finalize their plan for the evening. We still need a bit of the people you're changing into," said Hermione matter-of-factly, as though she was sending them off to the supermarket for washing powder. "And obviously, it'll be best if you can get something of Crabbe and Goyle's. They're Malfoy's best friends. He'll tell them anything. And we also need to make sure that the real Crabbe and Goyle can't burst in on us while we're interrogating him. I've got it all worked out," she said as she went smoothly, ignoring Harry and Ron's stupefied faces. She held out 2 plump chocolate cakes. "I filled these with a simple sleeping draught. All you have to do is make sure Crabbe and Goyle find them. You know how greedy they are. They're bound to eat them. Once they're asleep, pull out a few of their hairs and hide them in the broom cupboard." Harry and Ron looked incredulously at each other. "Hermione, I don't think that could go seriously wrong. But Hermione had a steely glint in her eye, not unlike the one Professor McGonagall had sometimes. The potion will be useless without Crabbe and Goyle's hair, she said sternly. You do want to investigate Malfoy, don't you? Oh, all right, said Harry. But what about you? Whose hair are you ripping out? I already got mine, said Hermione brightly, pulling a tiny bottle out of her pocket, showing them the single hair inside. Remember Millicent Bulstrode wrestling with me at the dueling club? She left this on my robes when she was trying to strangle me. She's gone home for Christmas, so I'll just have to tell Slytherins I've decided to come back. When Hermione had bustled off to check the polyjuice potion again, Ron turned to Harry with doom-laden expression. Have you ever heard of a plan where so many things could go wrong? But to Harry and Ron's utter amazement, the stage one of the operation went as smoothly as Hermione had said. They lurked into the deserted entrance hall after Christmas tea, waiting for Crabbe and Goyle, who had remained alone at the Slytherin table, shoving down 4 helpings of trifle. Harry perched the chocolate cakes on the end of the banisters. When they were spotted, Crabbe and Goyle coming out of the great hall, Harry and Ron hid quickly behind a suit of armor next to the front door. How thick can you get? Ron whispered ecstatically as Crabbe gleefully pointed out the cakes to Goyle and grabbed them. Grinning stupidly, they stuffed the cakes whole into their mouths. For a moment, both of them chewed greedily, looks of triumph on their faces. Then, without the smallest change of expression, they both keeled over backwards on the floor. Much of the most difficult bit was hiding them into the cupboard across the hall. Once they were safely stowed amongst the buckets and mops, Harry yanked out a couple of bristles covered Goyle's face, and Ron pulled out several of Crabbe's hairs. They also stole their shoes because their own were far too small for Crabbe and Goyle-sized feet. Then, still stunned at what they had just done, they sprinted up to Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. They could hardly see for the thick black smoke issuing from the cubicle which Hermione was stirring the cauldron. Pulling their robes over their faces, Harry and Ron knocked on the door. Hermione! They heard a scrape of lock and Hermione emerged, shiny-faced and looking anxious. Behind her they heard glop, glop of the bubbling treacle thick potion. 3 glass tumblers stood ready on the toilet seat. Did you get them? Hermione asked breathlessly. Harry showed her Goyle's hair. Good. And I sneaked these spare robes out of the laundry, Hermione said, holding up a large stack. You'll need bigger sizes once you're Crabbe and Goyle. The 3 of them stared at the cauldron. Close up, the potion looked thick, dark and mud, bubbling sluggishly. I'm sure I've done everything right, said Hermione, nervously rereading the splotched page of Moste Potent Potions. It looks like the book said, once we've drunk it, we'll have exactly an hour before we change back into ourselves. Now what? Ron whispered. We separate into 3 glasses and add the hairs. Hermione ladled large dollops of the potion into each of the glasses. Then, her hand trembling, she took Millicent Bulstrode's hair out of the bottle and into the glass. The potion hissed loudly like a boiling kettle and frothed madly. A second later, and turned a sick sort of yellow. Ugh. Essence of Millicent Bulstrode, said Ron, eyeing it with loathing. Bet it tastes disgusting. And yours then, said Hermione. Harry dropped Goyle's hair into the middle glass jar, and Ron put Crabbe's into the last one. Both glasses hissed and frothed. Goyle's turned khaki color and of a boogie, and Crabbe's a dark murky brown. Hang on, said Harry as Ron and Hermione reached for their glasses. We'd better not drink them all at once here. We turn into Crabbe and Goyle, who won't fit, and Millicent Bulstrode's no pixie. Good thinking, said Ron, unlocking the door. We'll take separate cubicles. Careful not to spill a drop of polyjuice potion, Harry slipped into the middle cubicle. Ready? He called. Ready, came Ron and Hermione's voices. 1, 2, 3. Pinching his nose, Harry drank the potion down in 2 large gulps. It tasted like overcooked cabbage. Immediately, his insides started withering as though he just swallowed live snakes. Doubled up, he wondered whether he would be sick. Then a burning sensation spread rapidly through his stomach to the very ends of his fingers and toes. Next, bringing him gasping to all fours, came a horrible melting feeling, as though his skin all over his body bubbled like hot wax before his eyes, and his hands began to grow and his fingers thickened. The nails broadened and his knuckles were bulging like bolts. His shoulders stretched painfully, and the prickling of his forehead told him that his hair was creeping down towards his eyebrows. His robes ripped as his chest expanded like a barrel bursting its hoops. His feet were in agony, and his shoes were 4 sizes too small. As suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. Harry lay face down in the cold floor, listening to Myrtle gurgling morosely at the end of the toilet. With difficulty, he kicked off his shoes and stood up. So this was what it felt like being Goyle. His large hands trembling, he pulled out his old robes, which were hanging a foot above his ankles. He put on the spare ones and laced up Goyle's boat-like shoes. He reached up and brushed his hair out of his eyes and met only with short growth of wiry bristles low on his forehead. Then he realized his glasses were clouding his eyes because Goyle obviously didn't need them. He took them off and called, "Are you two okay?" Goyle's low rasp of a voice issued from his mouth. "Yeah," came the deep grunt of Crabbe from his right. Harry unlocked the door and stepped in front of the cracked mirror. Goyle stared back at him, full of deep-set eyes. Harry scratched his ear. So did Goyle. Ron's door opened. They stared at each other, except looked pale and shocked. Ron was indistinguishable from Crabbe, from the pudding basin haircut to the long grill arms. "This is unbelievable," said Ron, approaching the mirror, prodding Crabbe's flat nose. "Unbelievable!" "We better get going," said Harry, loosening his watch that was cutting into Goyle's wrist. "We still have got to find out where the Slytherin common room is. I only hope we can have someone to follow." Ron, who'd been gazing at Harry, said, "You don't know how bizarre it is to see Goyle thinking." He banged on Hermione's door. "Come on, we need to go." A high-pitched voice answered them. I don't think I'm going to come with you after all. You go on without me." "Hermione, we know Millicent Bulstrode's ugly. No one's going to think it's you." "No, really, I don't think I'll come. You two hurry up. You're wasting time." Harry looked at Ron, bewildered. "That looks more like Goyle," said Ron. "That's how he'll look every time a teacher asks him a question." "Hermione, are you okay?" said Harry through the door. "Fine, I'm fine. Go on." Harry looked at his watch. 5 of their precious 60 minutes already passed. "We'll meet you back here, all right?" he said. Harry and Ron opened the door to the bathroom carefully and checked that the coast was clear and set off. "Don't swing your arms like that," Harry muttered to Ron. Crabbe holds them sort of stiff. How's this? Yeah, that's better. He went down the marble staircase. All they needed now was a Slytherin whom they could follow, a Slytherin to follow to the common room, but nobody was around. Any ideas? "The Slytherins always come up from breakfast over there," said Ron, nodding the entrance to the dungeons. The words had barely left his mouth when a girl with long curly hair emerged from the entrance. "Excuse me," said Ron, hurrying up to her. "We've gotten our way to the common room." "I beg your pardon," said the girl stiffly. "Our common room? I'm a Ravenclaw." She walked away, looking suspiciously at them. Harry and Ron hurried the stone steps into the darkness, their footsteps echoing particularly loudly as Crabbe and Goyle's huge feet hit the floor, feeling that this wasn't going to be as easy as they hoped. The labyrinth passages were deserted as they walked deeper and deeper under the school, constantly checking their watches to see how much time they had left. After a quarter of an hour, just as they were getting desperate, he heard a sudden movement ahead. "Ha!" said Ron excitedly. "There's one of them now." The figure was emerging from the side of a room. As they hurried nearer, however, their hearts sank. It wasn't a Slytherin, it was Percy. "What are you doing down here?" said Ron in surprise. Percy looked affronted. "That," he said stiffly, "is none of your business. It's Crabbe, isn't it?" "What? Oh, yeah," said Ron. "We'll get off to your dormitories," said Percy sternly. "It's not safe to go wandering down dark corridors these days." "You are," Ron pointed out. "I," said Percy, drawing himself up, "am a prefect. Nothing's about to attack me." A voice suddenly echoed behind Harry and Ron. Draco Malfoy was strolling towards them, and the first time in his life, Harry was pleased to see them. "There you are," he drawled, looking at them. "Have you two been peeking out in the Great Hall all this time? I've been looking for you. I want to show you something really funny." Malfoy witheringly at Percy. "What are you doing down here, Weasley?" he sneered. Percy looked outraged. "You want to show a bit more respect to a school prefect," he said. "I don't like your attitude." Malfoy sneered and motioned Harry and Ron to follow him. Harry almost said something apologetic to Percy, but caught himself in time. He and Ron hurried after Malfoy as they turned into the next passage. "That Peter Weasley." "Percy," Ron corrected him automatically. "Whatever," said Malfoy. "I've noticed him sneaking around a lot lately, and I bet I know what he's up to. He thinks he's going to catch the Slytherin's heir single-handed." He gave a short, decisive laugh. Harry and Ron exchanged excited looks. Malfoy paused with a stretch of bare and damp stone wall. "What's the new password again?" he said Harry. Said Harry. "Oh, yeah, pure blood," said Malfoy, not listening, and a stone door concealed in the wall opened. Malfoy marched through, and Harry and Ron followed him. The Slytherin common room was a long, low, underground room with lots of stone walls and ceiling, which greenish lamps were hanging on the chains. A fire was crackling under the elaborately carved mantelpiece ahead of them, and several Slytherins were silhouetted around in carved chairs. "Wait here," said Malfoy to Harry and Ron, motioning a pair of empty chairs back to the fire. "And I'll go and get it. My father just sent it to me." Wonder what Malfoy could be showing them. Harry and Ron sat down, doing their best to look at home. Malfoy came back a minute later, holding what looked like a newspaper cutting under Ron's nose. "That'll give you a laugh," he said. Harry saw Ron's eyes widen in shock as he read the cutting quickly, gave a very forced laugh, and handed it to Harry. It had been clipped out of the Daily Prophet. It said, "The Inquiry at the Ministry of Magic. Arthur Weasley, head of the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office, was today fined 50 galleons for bewitching a muggled car. Mr. Lucius Malfoy, a governor of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, where the enchanted car crashed earlier this year, called today for Mr. Weasley's resignation. Mr. Weasley has brought to the ministry into disrepute," Mr. Malfoy told our reporter. "He is clearly unfit to draw upon our laws, and his ridiculous Muggle Protection Act should be scrapped immediately." Mr. Weasley was unavailable for comment, though his wife told the reporters to clear off, or she'd set the family ghoul on them. "Well," said Malfoy impatiently, as Harry handed the cutting back to him, "don't you think that's funny?" "Ha ha," said Harry bleakly. "Arthur Weasley loves Muggles so much he should snap his wand in half and go and join them," said Malfoy scornfully. "You'll never know the Weasleys were purebloods the way they behave." Ron, or rather Crabbe's face, was contorted with fury. "What's up with you, Crabbe?" snapped Malfoy. "Stomachache," Ron grunted. "We'll go up to the hospital wing and give all those mudbloods a kick for me," said Malfoy, snickering. "You know, I'm surprised the Daily Prophet hasn't reported on these attack yet," he went thoughtfully. "I suppose Dumbledore is trying to hush it all up. He'll be sacked if something doesn't stop soon. Father's always said that Dumbledore is the worst thing that ever happened to this place. He loves Muggleborns. A decent headmaster would never let slime like that creepy in." Malfoy started taking pictures with an imaginary camera and did a cruel but accurate impression of Colin. "Potter, can I have your picture? Potter, can I have your autograph? Can I lick your shoes, please, Potter?" He dropped into his hands and looked at Harry and Ron. "What's the matter with you two?" Far too late, Harry and Ron forced themselves into a laugh, but Malfoy seemed satisfied. Perhaps Crabbe and Goyle were always slow on the uptake. "St. Potter, the Mudblood's friend," said Malfoy slowly. "He's another one with no proper wizard feeling, or he wouldn't go around with that jumped-up Granger Mudblood, and the people think he's the Slytherin heir." Harry and Ron waited with bated breath. Malfoy was about seconds away from telling it was him, but "I just wish I knew who it was," said Malfoy. "I could help him." Ron's jaw dropped, so Crabbe's face looked even more gormless than usual. Unfortunately, Malfoy didn't notice. Here is a picture of Draco Malfoy. Harry said fast, "You must have some idea who's behind it all." "You know I haven't, Goyle. How many times do I have to tell you?" snapped Malfoy. "And Father won't tell me anything about the last time the chamber was opened either. Of course, it was 50 years ago, so it was before his time. But he knows. And he says that it was all kept quiet, and it looks suspicious if I know too much about it. But I know one thing. The last time the Chamber of Secrets was open, a Mudblood died. So I bet it's only a matter of time before one of them's killed this time. I hope it's Granger," he said with relish. Ron clenching Crabbe's gigantic fists, feeling that it would be a giveaway if Ron punched Malfoy. Harry shot him a warning look and said, Do you know if the person who opened the Chamber of Secrets last was caught?" "Oh, yeah. Whoever it was, they were expelled," said Malfoy. "They're probably in Azkaban." "Azkaban?" said Harry, puzzled. "Azkaban. The wizard prison, Goyle," said Malfoy, looking at him in disbelief. "Honestly, if you were any slower, you'd be going backwards." He shifted restlessly in his chair and said, "Father said to keep my head down and let the heir Slytherin get on with it. He says the school needs ridding of all the mudblood filth, but not to get mixed up in the curse. He says a lot on his plate at this moment. You know, the Ministry of Magic raided our manor last week." Harry tried to force Goyle's dull face into a look of concern. "Yeah," said Malfoy. "Luckily they didn't find much. Father's got some very valuable dark art stuff, but luckily we've got our own secret chamber under the drawing room floor. Ho, said Ron. Malfoy looked at him. So did Harry. Ron blushed. Even his hair was turning red. His nose was also lengthening, and their hour was up. Ron was turning into himself, and from the look of horror he was suddenly giving Harry, he must be too. They jumped to their feet. Medicine for my stomach, Ron grunted, and without further ado they sprinted the length of the Slytherin common room, hurled themselves at the stone wall, and dashed up the passageway, hoping again that Malfoy didn't notice anything. Harry could feel his feet slipping around in Goyle's huge shoes, and he had to hoist his robes up as he shrank. Then he crashed the steps of the entrance hall, which was a full, muffled pounding coming from the cupboard where they locked Crabbe and Goyle. Leaving their shoes outside the cupboard door, they sprinted to their socks and to the marble staircase to Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Well, it wasn't a complete waste of time, Ron panted, closing the bathroom door behind him. I know we still haven't found out who's doing the attacks, but I'm going to write to Dad tomorrow to tell him to check on her Malfoy's drawing room. Harry checked on the face in the mirror. He was back to normal. He put his glasses on as Ron hammered on the door about Hermione's cubicle. Hermione, come out. We've got loads to tell you. Go away, Hermione squeaked. Harry and Ron looked at each other. What's the matter, said Ron. You must be back to normal by now. We are. But Moaning Myrtle glided suddenly through the cubicle door. Harry never seen her looking so happily. Ooh, wait till you see her, she said. It's awful. They heard the lock slide, and Hermione emerged sobbing in her robes, pulled up over her head. What's up, said Ron uncertainly. Have you still got Millicent's nose or something? Hermione let her robes fall, and Ron backed into the sink. Her face was covered in black fur, her eyes had gone yellow, and there were long pointed ears poking through her hair. It was a cat hair, she howled. Millicent Bulstrode must have a cat, and the potion isn't supposed to be used for animal transformations. Uh-oh, said Ron. You'll be teased something dreadful, said Myrtle happily. It's okay, Hermione, said Harry. We'll take you up to the hospital wing. Madame Pomfrey never asks too many questions. It took a long time to persuade Hermione to leave the bathroom. Moaning Myrtles sped them on their way with a hearty guffaw. Wait till everyone finds out you've got a tail. And that is where we will stop for today. So our next chapter, chapter 13, is about the very secret diary. All right? So we know now that Malfoy is not the heir to Slytherin. So I want you to make guesses. Who do you think it is? All right, guys. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.